Welcome to Who You Were with Patrick Noth and Sebastian Canelli. In each episode, we ask our guests to talk about a time in their life when they were significantly different. Episode 3, Jim Gaffigan.
If this was Lady Bird, who would be Lady Bird and who would be Jonah Hill's sister?
You know what? I didn't see Lady Bird. And we had the screener, too.
That's so sexist.
Yeah.
I know.
It was. I was like, I'm not
disgusting. I paid for a ticket and didn't see it.
You paid for a ticket and didn't see it.
I missed the movie. I went to go see, it was too late. The movie started. But then I watched it at home.
Oh, there you go.
See, there you go. That's not too bad.
That's not bad.
No, it already started. I walked in. I go, I'll watch it at home because I got the screener.
Oh, there you go.
So, we didn't answer your question at all. Instead, I just talked some shit about me.
I was on a plane. That's the only reason I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or else none of us would have watched
good.
it.
You know, it's interesting. I don't know.
Welcome to Who You Were. This is a podcast where we bring on comedians and other people.
We've been looking for a theme song.
I was a piano man.
Today,
who I was.
Today we have Jim Gaffigan, who is, comedian. He's well known. You know who he is. He's been nominated for a bunch of Grammys.
Never won.
Nominated though. That's
nominated. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You know, when I met you, I didn't think that you would be the one who was getting nominated for Grammys over me.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I didn't think I would ever be nominated for a Grammy. When I started stand-up, I didn't know they even did that for comedians.
Yeah, at the Grammys, Best Comedy Album.
Yeah, I didn't know they do that.
You went to the Grammys when you were nominated? Yeah, I guess. You went when you were nominated?
Yeah, it was in New York this year, so I went.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah.
Because it used to be like vinyl, right? Like vinyl, like comedy albums used to be on vinyl. It felt more like an album.
Well, I think it was... I don't know. I mean, it's like there's the Grammys. You know, I'm no expert on Grammys, as I just said, but like it's music, and then there's kind of like, all right, comedy. How about like the best guy or gal who read a book? You know, like they throw some other categories.
It's like like audiobook or like best like sound effects CD,
right? Best ASMR.
So yeah, we bring people on to talk about a period of their life where they were significantly different than they are now. We do before and after pics, so you can go to our Instagram at Who You Were Podcast to check those out, and email us at whoyouwerepodcast@gmail.com to send us your before and after pic, and we'll post it to our Instagram. So, I mean, you have tons of credits, Jim, and I want to ask you a question. Beyond, like, the credits we know about you, like, who would you say you are, like, now? Like, what's your day-to-day life like?
Wow. Well, who I am now, I'm a mediocre father who's a comedian and an actor and a writer. I enjoy writing, and I've written some books with my wife, and I do these commentaries for CBS Sunday that people that watch that show see.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know. I mean, who am I, though? Like, I love the premise of this podcast.
Yeah.
I'm completely different in a lot of ways than who I was when I started stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When I started stand-up comedy, I mean, it's hard to articulate because it sounds a little bit like exaggeration, but I was somebody who had a fear of public speaking, like, so bad. I'm very fair-skinned. So, like, when I would talk in public, all the blood would rush to my face, and I would turn red, and occasionally an obnoxious person would be like, "Why is your face red?" So it was like that level of anxiety. And it's, being a parent, I see glimpses of it in my children, and it makes me, my stomach turn. But so I was somebody who, in their early 20s, I always wanted to be a comedian, but I worked in advertising, and I would be in a public, in a meeting, and I would have these, I wouldn't call them panic attacks, but I would just be articulating an idea, and then it would just be like the air would evaporate from my throat, and I would be kind of, and then people would be like, okay, Jim.
Yeah.
I mean, I still am an idiot, but so when I go on stage, I don't now, I would say the first 10 years, I dealt with a pretty significant amount of stage fright. I was always,
Wow, 10 years.
yeah, I would say there was definitely, I was always very jealous of friends that had a bar mitzvah, because I was like, that's like the first,
Yeah.
you're a teenager, it's
Yeah.
awkward, but everyone kills at their bar mitzvah.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
kind of set up for you to kill at your bar mitzvah.
Well, you have a joke about having to do the readings in church.
Oh, yeah.
Was that did you get as much anxiety from that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was somebody, I mean, I'm still, in some ways, I'm the same in that I like to choose the type of attention I have.
Yeah.
So in group settings, I don't need to be the focus of attention. I don't think I do.
Right.
Like, I'm married to a very strong-willed woman
Yeah.
who, can steer a lot of situations. And so,
You kind of just hang back and let her run the show?
and I like being around people like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's all, so like even when I was a little kid, my family, I'm the youngest of 6, and when they would sing happy birthday to me, I would get really embarrassed.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
I thought it was very awkward, and there was this running story of how, like, when I was a little toddler, I used to bite my dad's arm when they would sing it because I would be so angry because he would kind of do it intentionally after a while.
He knew it made you anxious, so he
Yes.
played it up.
And by the way, the last name Gaffigan is Gaelic for anxious.
Really?
Yes.
Wait, I
So
always
it's
thought last
inherent.
names were like after a profession, not after like a.
No, they're all different things.
Really?
So some
Wait,
of them
that's
are
not a
professions.
joke? That's a real thing?
That's not a joke. Well, it's in my new special. It's a fact, though.
Wow.
So that means that somebody named themselves that at
Yes.
some point,
I'm not sure if it was.
or somebody
If it
gave
was-
them that name.
Yeah, someone
I think it's somebody, you can be named. Now I feel like I'm Ancestry.com sponsoring this podcast. You can be named after the town you're from. A lot of Italians have that. You can be named after occupations.
Right.
And you can be named like son of, like all those Johnsons are son of John.
That's
Yeah.
the Russian thing.
Yeah.
Petrovich or whatever.
Yeah.
Fuck
And
that
so
up.
like it all is and then the Spanish have like, 8 names, like you're named after your mom too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weirdos. I can say that because I don't look Spanish.
Wait, so the time you want to talk about is in your 20s when you're
Yes.
in advertising. You have a fear of public speaking.
Fear of public speaking, but I would also say that I didn't grow up believing that I could be an entertainer. I didn't, my family was, even the town I grew up in, Indiana, no one was in the entertainment industry. It was very strange. Show people it was insane.
Yeah.
It's kind of, so it was not something I even articulated.
Because it was like you're responsible. You get your 401k. It was just
You seek a job that has security.
Yeah.
And I think some of it might be my parents were, they didn't grow up in the Depression, but like my father was the first one to go to college, so
Sure.
security.
They were a victim of that.
It's like I think generations had worked in coal mines. They're like, dude, just get a collar on your shirt and
right.
Sure. Yeah.
work for half your life and then
Don't have to do
like,
manual labor.
Right,
Get an
exactly.
office job and then you succeeded.
having some security
You know what's interesting? I don't think we've ever talked about this, but Jim is my brother-in-law, and my wife Emily.
and lover.
Yes, this is very awkward for me. They're sitting very close to each other.
Yes.
But Emily, my wife, comes from a family that's very similar to yours.
Yes.
Whereas like our family was sort of, we didn't even talk about financial stuff. It was never
Right.
something that was like emphasized.
Right. But I would say that, your family was kind of unique to the Midwest. Like
Yes.
there's a practicality.
For sure.
Your wife's from the Midwest, I'm from the Midwest. There's a practicality. And it's just unfamiliar. Like on the East Coast or in California, I think, you might have some relative indirectly related to the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
Even if it's somebody that's like a caterer
Right.
on a show, they have an interaction with that, but like I grew up in the suburbs I grew up in Indiana, but like really the suburbs of Chicago, way out. So like we didn't see newscasters, we didn't see anybody.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was just
There was local celebrities though, maybe?
not really. No, there was not that. Not that I know of.
There wasn't like a car dealership guy who was like a big deal?
Nothing. Nothing. It was like, but like there was no, because I know that I travel all around, and like local news media people have kind of a prominence in certain cities, but we didn't have that because ours were an hour away.
But at this time in your life, were there other things that were significantly different, like what you did for fun, or what kind of clothes you wore, or what music you listened to?
I think that like my teenage years and early 20s, I don't want to say I was brainwashed, but again, I came from that culture of seeking security, and so I think I was finding my way of like and I also have an older brother who's like 18 months older than me, so we were essentially raised in the same outfits and stuff like that. And so whatever he did, I did.
Sure.
So like he played football, I played football. He,
What position you play?
I was center and defensive end.
Center. Cool. So you played the line. I was a lineman also.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a certain size, you just are forced to be a lineman.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
your dream is just to catch a ball once. I remember one
like
time.
there's a fumble.
Well, one time in a game, someone tipped the ball up, and I caught it as an offensive lineman, and everyone just screamed, "Fall down!"
It is funny when a defensive
they didn't want me
lineman
to
like
run.
picks up a fumble or they're running into the end zone,
Yeah.
like somehow they get a turnover.
Uh-huh.
They're clearly happier than anybody else on the field
Yeah.
who's running into the end zone.
To touch the ball, and you got to touch the ball every play, you asshole.
Yeah.
You were lucky to be center.
And I would do long snaps. That's kind of like a skill position almost.
And then, you got to go to the side with the QB, and just you two would practice. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was, but that being said, it's like, I don't think I was discouraged to, because obviously I eventually took that path, but
Yeah.
my brothers were very funny. I mean, they're still alive, but they're very funny.
Not as funny anymore, though. Are they?
But the joke in my family is that I was third funniest. So it
Yeah.
was like, but I pursued it, and they were, I remember one time I bought my brother Joe a class at Second City. He lives in Chicago, and he couldn't go because he had this job that, you had to put in a significant amount of hours.
Yeah.
So jobs always came first, career first, just having like a stability in your life was the number one.
I think it was, it wasn't, I mean, some of it is, I think, it wasn't like we were the children of the Reagan era. So like greed wasn't as prevalent, but like success was, having a professional job.
Right.
Whereas-
Practicality was, yeah.
Yeah. So like, whereas I don't have that view really. Like I don't, because I also know people that, might be pipe fitters and they make more than my brothers that are bankers.
I teach improv, and a lot of times when I teach the lower levels, some of the funniest people are like professionals who are not going to pursue, comedy at all. And I'm just like, you're so fucking funny, I sort of like wish you would quit your job and take that risk.
But I think that some of it is that leap. I mean, this is, it's the prison of the mind, man.
Yeah.
No, but it is a little bit of, like, I don't know about you guys, but I feel as though they're, whether it's audacity or balls or just kind of desire, like when you talk about some of those people that are students, it's like, I feel like that all the way in every step of the entertainment industry. Because it's, when you think about it, it's like, there are great directors and everything, but like they had to decide, I'm going to direct.
Yeah.
And I was, I'm kind of, every step of the way, I've been kind of, I feel like a couple years after I do something the wrong way, I always look back and go, why didn't I just do it the way I wanted? I mean, not like a dick about it, but I kind of knew what would work for me. Why was I so compliant?
Yeah.
And I think some of that compliance is something that I'm trying to, work away.
I mean, that I feel like for me is like a lifelong process of saying like, oh, like trusting your instincts or learning to trust yourself as opposed to like pressures that are old, Like,
right, right.
Well, it's hard because it like goes back to like self-worth and like, is my opinion actually good and stuff like that? And that's...
Or like, like even working on this show, my wife and I wrote this show, and it took us till the second season where I was like, get rid of everyone. Just you and me, Jeannie. We're going to write these, and we'll bring people in.
Oh, you guys had writers in the first season?
There was, not really, but there was a guy who was kind of assistant show running with Jeannie.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's a good guy, but like, his instincts were completely different from ours.
His sensibilities different.
And so like even working as a partnership with my wife, there were times where I was like, she's like, we could do this, and I'm like, we're going to do what we want. And she would be like, you're being a monster. And I'd be like, but like, and some of it is what's so good about working on a TV show where you write and all that stuff is there's so much work involved that you better have ownership of the idea to follow it through. Whereas comedians and I think improvisers, it's not disposable, but it's something that we kind of let go of. Like you'll be in the middle of a scene and you'll be like, well, this one's garbage.
Yeah.
But you don't give that much emotional weight to it.
You have to learn not to.
You have to be a little bit compliant. Go, all right. You know what? I just burned this Friday night.
Yeah.
But where if it's your project, you have to, I don't know. There's
something permanent about, having something on film or, it's really like, it feels like I at least put a lot of pressure on myself to make it like the best thing in the world.
Yeah. But then there's the other side of like just doing it. I mean, it took me a while to realize that it's always the sum of the parts. Like I still get a movie and in my mind, I'm like, this is it. I'll never have to audition again.
Right.
And it's insane.
Yeah, you have to keep going.
There's this, I mean, I enjoy, like the grind or whatever you call it, but it's like there is no, I mean, I read this article last night about Robin Williams. The guy won an Academy Award. He won like a Tony and a Grammy and all this. And at the end, he was, doing like indies that he didn't even like.
Yeah.
Which is... So it is a long road, but I think the perception is that you get some job and then you're on some conveyor belt and let into some room with Jennifer Lawrence and Leo DiCaprio.
Well, because it's the opposite.
I call him Leo.
Oh, the celebrity, yeah.
Because it's the opposite of what we were talking about before, where it's just like the stability, the practicality. Like there is none of that. It could all go away, right?
Yeah.
It's like a completely different existence.
And that's what kept you in the office job, is that stability.
I think it was like I kept my day job a lot longer than anybody else. And it wasn't that, like I'd always resigned myself to the, not always, but I resigned myself. I was like, all right, I'm going to be the weird uncle who lives in a crappy apartment in New York City.
Yeah.
And that's all right.
Yeah. So no plans on having 5 kids.
No way. No way. I was also, there's also like the different me. Like I also was somebody who was so into my career that it was kind of like I thought that like taking time away from my career for a relationship or for children, that it was going to destroy my career. Like that's another kind of fallacy that is kind of presented. It's like these people, they have a kid and it's over.
Right.
And so, but what I realized is also that I don't want to describe it as blind ambition, but like focused kind of mania on creation or creating things is not as constructive as some forced balance. Right. So there's, at least for me as a writer, there's moments where I'll be like, I got nothing, and then boom, something will pop out. And
because your writing is inspired by the day-to-day life with the
absolutely.
family.
And obviously it's deceptively rewarding, because there's also, like, we know is kind of, whenever you hear a parent say, it's great, you're like, are you convincing me or yourself?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So it's certainly not easy, but I don't know. For me, it's also, I'm not some social butterfly. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, like, every now and then someone will be like, do you want to go to lunch? And I'm like, do you know me? Like, I'm like, if you thought, and that's not to say that I don't want to go to lunch. That's not to say that I'm not going to eat lunch. It's just to say that I, like, particularly on the road, when I'm committed to things, like, people are like, during the day, do you want to, like, I remember, this is a long time ago, I was opening for this comedian in DC, and he got a tour of the White House. And this is like, I think it was during, like, Clinton's era. And he turned to me and he goes, I got this special tour of the White House. Do you want to go? And I was like, what time is it at? And he goes, it's the White House. It's a special tour of the White House. And I'm like, I guess I could nap after. And he's like, what is wrong with you? Because I'm so, I'm so programmed to, like, every kind of moment, either conserving energy,
Yes.
Writing, rewriting, organizing, that sometimes the forced chaos, or definitely there's numerous times of forced chaos, to take you away from it is perfect.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because if I would just be sitting and going over and over stuff, and it
gives you life.
It does. You can't sit there. If there's no fish in the well, you can't sit there. The longer you fish, it's not like fish are going to show up there.
Right.
What a metaphor.
I wanted to jump back because you said I kept my day job longer, and I assume that meant, like, than your peers at the time? Your stand-up peers.
Well, some of it was, how I remember it, again, I had a lot of stage fright. I also wasn't incredibly good with the politics. Stand-up comedy is different now. It was much more like it feels like stand-up is coming up. It's much more Little Ivy. Like, I'm not saying people went to Little Ivy, but, like, it's more college educated. Whereas when I started, it felt much more blue collar. It felt more, combat.
Yeah.
And so some of it was getting along with or schmoozing comedy club owners, which back in the day were even more prickly and difficult.
And huge gatekeepers, right?
And huge gatekeepers. And I was not good at it. Sure. And I was this guy from the Midwest who was very white bread. So I would be on Long Island or I would be in a comedy club and they'd be like, who's this guy? Like, it just... But so my friends, my peers had better access at it. I also had stage fright. And so I think that, I don't even remember the question. But,
I have a question though. So you talked about, like, you couldn't even talk, right? Like you had trouble speaking.
Or I would talk for a little bit and then I would be like, okay, here goes.
How'd you push past that?
I think it was just a frequency.
You just
it was like the 10,000 hours, and
well, what made you want to start if, like, you had trouble speaking in front of people before that?
If I was in this setting, and I was comfortable with both of you, I would be fine. But, like, if I was I was new to improv and I knew that you guys, I don't know if you teach or if you're on some team, but if you had higher status than me, I would be very nervous. Like, I would give my power away to that situation for no practical reason. That's not to say that but it wouldn't be constructive
Yeah.
to, my insecurity in that situation wouldn't be constructive. But so my fear of public speaking was, I think a lot of comedians, it's figuring out how you're funny in everyday life and getting it on stage.
Yeah, so it's natural. Yeah.
And so, and then working on that point of view. So that's where I was kind of light years from that, and was trying a lot of different things.
Right. But in this context, you said like you would be comfortable with a small group of people.
Yeah.
Also, you're in a hot tub right now.
I'm in a hot tub. But like if this was an advertising meeting and you guys were my bosses, I would clam up.
You know what?
I would be, insecure.
Yeah,
Sebastian,
I'm a sweater, so like in those situations, I start sweating, and once I start, I can't stop.
I remember
It's very
being
sexy.
Thank you very much, Jim.
I remember being jealous of like Sebastian because I was the same way, particularly with higher status people like in the improv community who I really looked up to and respected. And I'm sure you had this maybe going on internally, but I remember you being so confident right off the bat, and I was like, oh, I wish I had that.
I guess I like doing comedy, but I wasn't a big fan of it in the beginning, which actually helped me.
Right. So you weren't.
I wasn't marveled by like, oh, this person's on a team here. I go, cool.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, it's for me, it wasn't even necessarily I could be talking to in a business setting with people I didn't necessarily even respect, and I would still be like, well, they're a vice president. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Right.
And I don't know. So it's weird.
Were there people in the comedy world, besides the club owners, were there people in the comedy world where you saw them just kind of know their voice or not have those inhibitions? Or
Yeah, there were definitely people that there's comedians, and you'll see it, like people that feel immediately comfortable on stage. By the way, this is all stand-ups talk about, because it's, in the end, we're all comedy nerds, right?
Yeah.
And so there were people that were immediately comfortable on stage, but the people that had a complexity where they weren't immediately comfortable there was something more complex going on. Right. So in other words, the people that were immediately comfortable, I felt like, this is probably unfair to say, but like they were more like the host or the game show host.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a persona more than it is.
It's a persona, but they're also they're very engaging.
Right.
And that's not to say that skill isn't important.
Right. So you're saying that Sebastian is just kind of putting on a fake persona.
Yes. I'm saying that he doesn't wear underwear.
What were some like moments at this time? You're in advertising, you're doing stand up, but you're reluctant to go all in. Are there moments at this time that are significant that you remember where you're like, this, I have to jump off, this ledge?
To jump off, not do it, or jump into it?
Jump into it.
Well, I think I decided a point. The first time I did stand up, there was something very empowering. I should also backtrack to like when I was in college, there were these rich kids that used to get me high so that I would be funny.
Yeah.
Like at their party, they'd be like, let's get Gaffigan over here. Like I was some kind of circus animal. And so, but for me, the amount of humiliation I went through those first couple of years, like it was not, like if insanity is repeatedly doing something and expecting a different result, I was definitely insane.
Yeah.
So it was, there weren't a lot of moments where people, that's not to say that I was horrible.
Yeah.
I just don't think I was good. And I think I was not necessarily getting better, but the diving into it, I had this day job, and it wasn't necessarily fear, because I knew that I knew inevitably this is the path. I was going to be the weird uncle that did this.
Yeah.
By the way, all my peers, they always got things ahead of me. So everyone got a late night show before me. Everyone got a manager before me. Everyone got, into the Montreal Comedy Festival before me. But it was one of those things where I think it, so say I was going 1 for 5 in sets. It was rewarding, But I remember like auditioning for the Montreal Comedy Festival, which at that moment had a lot of importance, or maybe it was Aspen, which was kind of like HBO's kind of like American version of Montreal, and getting off stage and seeing the talent booker look at me and run out of the building. Ugh. Because it was just like there was and by the way, I had a lot of anger. I was pretty much furious. Like I remember you have these moments where like, you know, like people would be like friends that you respect would be like, dude, you're really angry. And because there was an injustice, but like,
yeah.
I mean, that's also what I was like as a teenager. I remember my brothers and sisters going, you're not going to change, Dad. Why do you let it bother you?
Yeah.
That's so interesting because your persona, how you come across is so nice and friendly.
Well, I would say that, you know, it's also, I think for stand-up, it's kind of like, it's not what works, but it's also, I think that annoyance and anger with an idea, and then how a comedian kind of deciphers that through their point of view. So in other words, me angry, it's like, it's, you know, like Louis Black angry or Chris Rock angry. People enjoy that. Mm-hmm. But like some people, they're like, should we call the cops? You know what I mean? Or like, it makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I also look like Hitler's wet dream, so that probably doesn't help.
But, you were saying you were frustrated because other people were getting stuff, and the perception. Do you think it was because this guy's from the Midwest? He doesn't fit this like stand-up archetype at the time of like blue collar.
No, I think it was. And by the way, there were plenty of people that were kind of college educated. I think I was. You know, you develop. And people, when I would go on stage, they would remember the old me. So even if I did well, they would remember me doing poorly.
Yeah.
And some of it is probably, you know, just general skills of schmoozing. Like, I can kiss ass, but, like, generally, I'm not that good at it. Like, I don't have, like, the facial memory of, like the most important person. Like, just basic things. It's like... that it's like if I could remember that, like I'm not good at that, but I'm good at some business side of it. But like the notion of going to a cocktail party and hanging out with other people, it feels kind of impractical. Or if I was in my 20s, I would just go and get wasted.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
And people would be like, "What are you doing?" And I'd be like, "There's beer here, right?
It's open bar. What am I supposed to do?"
Yeah.
So now it's like a nap.
Now it's a nap.
Yeah.
Or now it's, you know, I think having 5 kids it gets me out of a lot of obligations. Yeah. And, you know, it's sincere. I want to spend time with my kids.
And who's going to put up a fight? I have something with my kids. No, you don't. You got to come over for lunch.
Right. And so it's like, but, you know, I remember I also had to kind of implement that. Like when I got out of college, I had this litigation consulting job in Tampa, and when I got to New York, there were a lot of people from my university that were like, every Friday we go to Bubba Buzz, and then we go to McGillagoo's, and all this stuff. And I was like, and I had to decide that I wasn't going to do that. Right. And so I do have a practice. I mean, you know, some of it's isolating, but I do have a practice of not participating in the group thing. By the way, that's why I love stand-up comedy. In the, you know, generally, I mean, there are definitely groups and, you know, and I love all comedians, but like being a loner in stand-up comedy is not considered that odd.
Yeah.
Like there's truly eccentric people. So like, if you're not the most social butterfly, people don't hold it against you. They're not like, you weren't at the Friars.
Right.
People like, there's people that join the Friars. There's people that don't. There's people that, you know, hang out at the Cellar every night. There's people that, you know, get together and go to a Mets game. You know, it doesn't matter. But like, it's, you know, it's not that big of an issue.
You know, I think like I'm more of an introvert. I never thought this, but then I'm realizing that a lot of people in comedy are actually introverts. Like you can get up on stage and you know, and bring all this energy to it, but then like you need that time by yourself.
Yeah, there's something strange about deciphering what you do after the show.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've gone through different phases of where I, because it's when I started off, and I mean, I wouldn't get on until, like, I would do an open mic, which was just in front of other comedians, and those other comedians were not successful comedians. Some of them were mentally ill. I mean, I don't want to, like, bash them, but, like, they were struggling. I'm sure I was crazy at the time. And so then you would do that, then I would go to an acting class. Then I would have a spot at like 1 a.m, and then I would go to work the next day.
Wow. You would go to work. Wow.
And so then you would do this stuff. And so, after the show, even you guys know this. It's like there's something about performing at 8, 9, 10, midnight where you're like, how are you supposed to come down? Some people can have one beer and they're like, good night.
Yeah.
Sure. And some people, the motor just keeps going.
I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was just like eat a bunch of food and try to fall asleep, which isn't...
That's my tactic. Oh. But so like I've gone through different things where it's like, I used to work out twice a day. So I would literally, but then I was so exhausted on stage. It was like kind of, and then I would, then I drank, and then I didn't drink, and then I drank again, and then now I'm like on the meal thing. But like as I get older, it's also like the energy push is more taxing. You know what I mean? So even taking like a cross country flight, I'm like, okay, all right. I mean, I guess people do yoga and they meditate, so like that's what I probably should do. But I prefer like a nap.
Yeah. So I want to know when did you find it appropriate to leave advertising? Like what did it take career wise?
I booked this commercial for Blockbuster that was I think it was like a worldwide campaign. Well, wow. English speaking. So it was in the UK. The UK was just getting Blockbuster. This tells you how long. Of course, Blockbuster's gone.
This commercial's still running, by the way.
But so it was like Blockbuster was big in the US. And then, so they had this campaign where, was it just in the UK? I think it was just in the UK. It wasn't even in the US. Yeah, because it was 4 American comedian kind of archetypes for the UK. And so one of them was Jamie Kennedy, if you know who Jamie Kennedy is. And he was probably, I don't know, I was like maybe 29. He was maybe 23. And then there was an African-American woman and a white American woman who lived in the UK who was kind of kooky. Mm-hmm. And I remember having that call back and getting that, and I was like, oh wow, that's where. But I think I'd already been laid off by then. I'm just realizing. So I'm like,
wait, so you got fired?
They woke me up to lay me off.
So you were sleeping at work.
Yeah. But the weird thing is advertising was, and by the way, Dave Attell had a joke where he was talked about being waken up and fired. Mm-hmm. And then later on, I was waken up and laid off. So it was just like, it was kind of like my life imitating Dave Attell's joke. But yeah, no. But I had been trying to get, because as you know, if you're like a struggling person, you know that like you get the unemployment for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I also, if you get laid off, also you can keep your health insurance for 6 months. But if you quit, I think you have to pay for it right away. And so, or maybe after 3 months. And so I wanted to get the unemployment insurance for a year.
Yeah.
So like I didn't want to, but So like I was
it gave
wrong
you
about
this opportunity. It gave you, a year or 6 months, and you got to double down on this. Now I know that you did a lot of commercial stuff, right? Like at that time when you first got out.
Yeah.
So that must have been like, settling. But I want to ask about your early stand-up because it was I saw an old clip of you that Jeannie, my sister, showed me, and it was pretty dirty.
Well, I tried a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand, I was having no success on any of it.
Yeah.
So, and some of it, I mean, I could totally nerd out, but some of it is comedians try and find their point of view, 10,000 hours, you get over stage fright and stuff like that. So when I started, if you saw my very first set, it's almost kind of similar to what I do now.
Yeah.
But like after I did that for 6 months and kind of ate it and was insecure, I tried on different identities. And some of those identities were different successful comedians at the time. And you'll still see that. You'll see people, you're like, oh, they're going through their Todd Barry phase. Or, oh, now this, name the hottest comedian. People will be doing the John Mulaney thing. Like their cadence, their vocal impressions were almost kind of sound like his. And so I tried to do, and I think irreverent comedians had more kind of success because again it was much more combat back then,
right?
And I was this white bread guy, so I had to go on stage with authority,
right?
Whereas I'm very self-effacing, but like before I had to go on stage, I used to smoke on stage,
Wow.
And everyone was smoking, but like I would smoke and I'd be doing a 10-minute set. Like you can't go 10 minutes without a cigarette. And so
was it part of it sort of? It was like
I think it was some of the being tough was more important than cuz again it was combat. So like and I walked up there looking as white bread as I am and I think people were like, "Okay, let's have some fun." If they're in the audience cuz back then a lot of people didn't know, they had seen 5 minutes of stand-up, but if they saw 5 minutes of Rodney Dangerfield, they probably believe they're supposed to participate.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Now, because you were also in New York at a different time, like that, there wasn't a lot of people from the Midwest here.
No.
Yeah, when you first started doing stand-up, so you were like this anomaly on stage.
Right.
Almost, yeah.
I mean, it was. Yeah, I think there was definitely. This is when like Brooklyn was Italian and African American before the hipsters went there, right?
Yeah, when my family was there.
And so like it was, but I would, that's why I have all these white jokes because I would go out to Brooklyn and people would be like, what is this guy John Tesh? Who is this guy? I don't know if you guys even know who John Tesh is. But like, so it was, I had to address the differentness. And also, I think New York City was much more ethnocentric. So people would go on stage and they'd be like, "I'm Jewish and my father's Italian," or I'm black and all you people are white. It was very much like there's still remnants of that, obviously, but like it's less of an issue.
Well, you also sort of embraced like a Midwest sensibility.
Too. Yeah, I didn't realize how Midwestern I was until I left the Midwest. Like growing up in the Midwest, I was like, there's been some mistake. I'm not supposed to be here.
Right.
I'm supposed to be in New York. And then I got to New York and people were like, Opie. And I was like, I'm not Opie. I'm supposed to be here.
So at what point during your stand-up career did you feel like you had that stability that you felt at a normal day job? Was it after that Blockbuster commercial? You were like, I feel like...
Well, commercials are very kind of... By the way, in that age, there were a lot more commercials.
Yes, and it wasn't non-union and SAG paid well.
And SAG paid well, and there wasn't... The internet wasn't really... an issue.
There was no SAG ultra low budget.
Yeah. So you could get a commercial and that could cover you for a year.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
And then there were people that they would get a couple commercials and they were buying a house and stuff like that. Wow. So Yeah, but I think that, there's different times when, but I also feel as though I was in New York and like, I think that headlining, I would do a middle spots, 30-minute sets on the road. And so I was so kind of like caught up in this New York world that when I started to do middle sets and eventually headline sets on the road, then I could even be more myself. So in other words, especially like the DC Improv and also working in Boston, it was like there were more people like me in DC or in Boston.
Yeah.
Whereas, so it was kind of like I had the New York, like I was kind of, like I remember Jeff Foxworthy saying this to me a long time ago. I was at the comic strip and and this is when he was like king of the world, before he was even the blue collar guy.
Yeah.
And he said, they never let me go on stage in New York. They never let me. And I was like, what do you mean they never? Because he was like the biggest thing in the world, but it didn't work.
Right.
You're a redneck. It's like as a reference point, that works for people that question whether they're a redneck.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and so it didn't work in New York. And so me talking about, it comes down to point of view, but me talking about my point of view resonated more in DC and Boston and Philly than it did necessarily in New York. But some of it is just like I could stretch out and get more comfortable on stage and be more quirky because, again, in New York was combat. Like you look at comedians of that era and they've kind of changed, but like the material is king. So like Dave Attell, Louis C.K., Todd Barry, it's, or Kevin Brennan, there's an absence of emotion. And so when I could go to DC and Boston, I could be kind of more vulnerable, which is what I am more in real life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's...
Yeah. So I want to jump ahead a little bit because you said like I was going to be the weird uncle.
Yeah.
What can we talk about that change and was that gradual or how did you decide? Oh, you know what? I'm going to get married. I am going to have kids. I'm sure it was gradual, but
yeah. I mean, it's. I always think it's so funny because there's also like comedian friends that when I was having all these kids, they're just like, okay, go ahead, You're just nuts. And I remember thinking that way, like seeing Ray Romano come into the Comedy Cellar and being like, that guy's funny. It's too bad he has kids. You know what I mean? Yeah, I would literally think that.
Because you think it would take them away from
and that was before his TV show.
Yeah.
And so, but it was kind of a gradual thing. Like, you have to understand. So, like, my hyper focus on, my career was, and I think my anger was resulting in, like, I didn't get Montreal, didn't get all these late night shows, I didn't get all these things. All my friends got it. Like I had friends that had done Conan numerous times and friends that had done Letterman, and it just wasn't happening for me. And I was angry and I was in therapy, and it was just like, eventually it was just kind of came to the point of like, all right, maybe I'm not going to get that stuff. I'm just going to be able to do what I like. And, I'm lucky enough to have a job I like. Yeah. And I'm not going to have these things that I desired. I'm kind of like resigned to the fact of that. And I'm just going to do my thing. And so when I did that, I think when I kind of like resigned, okay, I might be kind of like from my 20-year-old perspective or a failure. That's when like I stopped caring and kind of did my thing, and I think it opened up some things.
Yeah.
And so then so Letterman was this huge goal of mine, being from Indiana. And so once I got Letterman, I was like, here, I did it. I did it. And I was like on the stage, and I was like, I did it, like, I'm saying this to myself, I'm not saying it to the audience. And
hey folks,
and I realized, my brother had come in, and my dad had seen it on TV, and I was like, oh, well, all right, I proved that I could do stand-up, but what is that necessarily? I still, I'm still kind of like, there's something more, right?
Yeah.
And so then I think I had this approach of like being more open to things. But, there's a big difference between like deciding to take a step back on wild ambition and then going, all right, I'm going to be the father of 5 kids. Like, It was this slow progression. Like, initially it's like, all right, there's a kid. Okay, you're going to watch the kid mostly, right? And then there's 2 kids. Okay, there's going to be some of that. And then there's all the other stuff that happens, like ego and career and up and down.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where it kept expanding. The family kept expanding. And I was just like, all right, like by the 4th kid, I was like, all right, I'm just on for the ride. Do you know what I mean? And it was weird because with the 5th kid, there was something that was, obviously I enjoyed it, but it was, and I can't imagine, because it was like, living in a tiny apartment with 5 kids, it was chaos, but I don't have the energy to, I don't have the energy to go to a parent-teacher conference during the day and go to and do a show at night. Like, I'm that tired all the time. and back then it was like, we would do that, then my wife and I would take them to Chelsea Piers, then we would have dinner, then we would put the kids to bed, there would be a babysitter, then my wife and I, we would go out, do a show, discuss the material, and then have a couple drinks, and then get up and take them to school. Like, it was insane.
It probably didn't hurt to have a partner that was that wildly ambitious as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I remember watching you guys around that time and just being like, oh, I need to work so much harder. Because I just saw both of your work ethic. I think you joke around like about taking naps and stuff like that, but you work.
Oh, yeah. Well, by the way, I think that's a huge thing, is that I do enjoy it. Like, for me, working on even a CBS Sunday commentary, I'm not saying I want to do it for free, but it's something enjoyable.
You get something out of it.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'll look at your Instagram feed, and it's like, you have different videos that you're trying things out and you're doing things. And it's like, that's fun. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't feel like work, but like, so it's weird. But the fact that my partner in life or whatever is as equally busy. Like, we literally, there comes a time where, like last night, it's like 11:30, and it's usually kind of, all right, you done? Or it'll be like, oh my God, I got to get up in 5 hours. And so, like, there was a time maybe where we would be drinking wine doing that, but that hasn't happened in a long time.
Yeah.
So but I don't know, it is great that she has the same, like, that she gets as much enjoyment from work as I do. Because she's even crazier.
Yeah,
Really?
She's like, she does it with like a kid's birthday party where you're like, there's a birthday party, right? She's like, no, I figured out this grab bag. And I'm like, okay, good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had to point to like what the biggest, most significant difference between the time that we're talking about and the present day, like what would it be like?
I mean, there's so many, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I think it's just the knowledge of the enjoyment of doing the work.
Yeah.
Because I think that...
I think it was more something to prove, like when you first started, or do you think, like was it less enjoyable, but more like something you were chasing? Like, you talk about that moment on Letterman.
Yeah, I think maybe I was terrified, or... I was finding my way. But I remember, Greg Giraldo, who I started with. I remember, Tom and Jerry's wasn't even there, but it was some other place, and hanging out in there, and him saying, this is the fun part. Like, when we're really successful, we're gonna miss these days.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I hope not. and in a way, I'm much happier. Like, I'm so grateful that I was open to a relationship, that I have children, that that I realized that I kept in touch with my humility.
Yeah.
That's not to say that I don't have battles with it, but it's, and also, not to be too sappy, but it's like, I'm with someone who changes my life constantly.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I mean, she kind of smacks me around, not physically, but, you need that.
Yeah.
You need someone to sit there and go,
Not take your shit.
yeah, or to take some of it and then just go, all right, enough.
Yeah.
Something that
Yeah,
I kept hearing you say throughout this conversation was that you you gave yourself over to what had to happen. It felt like you had a struggle with something, and then you allowed yourself to be like, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I think that's something that was like is a good lesson and like beautiful to hear someone talk about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, what have you guys been hearing when you've been doing this?
Yeah.
Well, everyone's talking about different topics, so not everyone's talking about their how they went from just being like a stand up open micer to like a most successful like comedian, like one of the best. So like not everyone's talking about that. People are talking about other stuff. So
Right.
this is like one of our first big conversations about comedy.
Okay.
So it's like beautiful just to hear you talk about this stuff.
it's thank you, because it's like, as a parent, it's like I want to give, but you can tell kids, I mean, they got to figure it out themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because it's like, I wish someone would have told me some of the stuff that I learned, but I don't know. Maybe someone did, and I just didn't want to hear it.
Yeah, you only hear it when you're ready
Right?
to hear it.
Sure,
Yeah.
because I'm at home, I'm writing lists. This is the things I want to accomplish this year. This, and this, and like this is what I need. Set goals and stuff like that. And it's beautiful to hear you go like you won't make some of those goals, and that'll be some of the best parts of like what makes you you. And
But I used to make those lists. I think those lists are important.
of course, yeah.
Did you still think you were going to be just the weird uncle when you were in advertising, or when you jumped into stand-up, you were like, now I'm going to be the weird uncle?
I think it was more in stand-up, because I think I was 23 when I was in advertising, and I was still kind of dealing with office politics and
What do you think your life would look like now, like if you hadn't made that change?
I don't think it would have been good. Honestly, I think that, it's like there's a lot of anger.
Yeah.
And it's not, I mean, we can sit there and go, what caused it? But like the thing is like the important thing is that it doesn't kind of rule me.
And how you channel that anger.
Yeah, or like I know that creative fulfillment, and it took me a while to learn this, but like that creative fulfillment is what alleviates that frustration. Whether it be, my wife saying, why don't you go and do a spot? You're kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Or just doing something. It's, like I used to think it was about pleasing other people, but I think it's more about pleasing the inner critic.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something validating. It's almost like a way of liking yourself. Learn how to like yourself, because it's like,
what's that like?
I got
What's that like?
I'm learning. I'm trying.
I know, it's pretty awesome. I love myself. I'll teach you guys after this.
Jim, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah,
man.
thank
It
you
was-
so much for coming by.
It was really great. I've known you for a very long time. I don't think we've ever talked before. No,
We've never talked. Well, it's an interest. It's a great premise for a podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's very interesting, because you think like, because there's the story that we tell ourselves, and then there's the real story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the real story is there was a lot of anger,
Yeah.
You know, like the romantic story is I worked hard. Do you know what I mean? It's like I had to deal with, you know, growing up in some ways.
Yeah.
You know
The struggle is definitely like, it has to be part of it. You have to be honest about that.
Yeah.
Do you want to plug anything? I know you have a special coming out.
Yes. I don't know when this is plopping or dropping.
It plops. We only plop.
We're
here. We don't
plop.
drop.
We're gonna plop this in a couple weeks.
So yeah, July 13th, a new special that I wrote with my wife that will be an album and you know, streaming form. It's essentially going to be everywhere but Netflix.
Yeah.
It's how people have described it.
And how do people find you on social media? Because you're going to get a ton of followers.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, this is gonna be a big bump for you, Jim.
Jim Gaffigan.
Yeah, look out for it. You'll know when the episode drops.
At Jim Gaffigan. I'm just looking out the window and seeing a guy fold a towel. I'm sure he just... And he looks like... He's like a bald guy with a ponytail. And he looks like he's murdered someone.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the To Who You Were podcast. I'm Patrick Noth. You can find me at Patrick Noth on Twitter, at Patrick Noth with a 0 for Noth on Instagram. Email us your before and after pics at whoyouwerepodcast@gmail.com. Check our Instagram for before and after pics of us and our guests. Sebastian?
Yeah, if you want to follow me on Instagram, go ahead. But whatever, I don't care.
Hey.
What do you mean? Hey, I don't get excited over Instagram.
You don't?
No, it's not something that excites me.
You have about 3 pictures up in there of your butt.
Yeah, I keep on doing
All right,
Throwback
so
Thursday
you
of the same picture.
You definitely don't want people to follow you if you got pictures of yourself. Unless he has a really attractive butt.
Well, someone goes, I didn't realize Sebastian's butt was that nice. Someone told my girlfriend that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So,
And
follow me, Sebastian Canelli. You can check out that ass.
That was me. I told his girlfriend, you know what? I didn't realize Sebastian's butt was that nice.
Yeah, who was that? Why would he say that? Why would they say that to your girlfriend?
I know.
Hey, so when you grab his butt, do you realize that I thought it was good?
I thought it was going to be horrible. Loose potatoes in a bag.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Yeah.
Yep.
We did it.
Thank you for listening to Who You Were. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Guest before and after pics on Instagram at Who You Were Podcast. Send your before and after pics to whoyouwerepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at Who You Were Podcast. This podcast is produced independently. If you'd like to support it, please visit patreon.com/Patrick Noth. Thanks for listening.